everybody. Welcome to our study in Genesis. We are in Genesis chapter 50 tonight. This is the last chapter in the book of Genesis. We've come a very long way. And the book of Genesis is one of those books that's very difficult just to do a summary in a short period of time. So we're not going to attempt that. We will discuss chapter 50 tonight. We'll review 49. Before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about the difficulty with understanding Genesis chapter 49 simply because of the number of players. Again, in both 48 and 49, Israel, Jacob, is blessing his children. He blessed not necessarily just Joseph in 48. He blessed Joseph's two sons and made prophecies and promises for them. And then in 49, Israel blesses his other 11 sons. And there's prophecies there too. And there's a lot of people that he covers and a lot of people he discusses. And so it's really kind of hard to track it because there's just so many people and everything. And Terry, have you eaten yet, sweetheart?
Yeah.
Okay.
She don't like meatloaf.
She don't like meatloaf? Oh, gosh.
That's one of my favorite dinners, meatloaf. I love it.
Growing up, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's a standard
So you had it.
fare.
I make a lot, but I had the hamburger meat. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah, and I can make a mean meatloaf.
Yeah.
I can. My kids love my
I made
meatloaf.
plenty of meatloaf in my time. I just
Well, it's a staple. It's an American staple.
Yeah.
You know, because it's easy to make and it feeds a lot of people
Yeah, it makes a lot. Feeds a lot.
it stays
Good.
there.
and it stays there.
It
That's
doesn't
right.
go away.
That's right.
You like Chinese.
And then like we had tonight, we had sandwiches. So it's like any good meal. You can have it over and over again. It's like
Make nice sandwiches.
yeah, it's like a turkey dinner. Next thing you know, it turns into this. Next thing you know, it turns into soup. And the next thing you know, that's gone. But so we're in Genesis chapter 50 tonight, but we're reviewing 48 and 49. All right. The most important thing to talk about as we finish the book of Genesis is that this book lays the foundation for the entire Bible. I think that's as big of a statement I can say about anything. To say that Genesis lays the foundation for the entire...
Yeah.
I got it over here. I came here after you and I go home. No. There's always room for one more.
Oh, yeah, sure. Are you kidding me?
Jesus' table is always room.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know how many people we put at this table. So can we just chat for a few minutes about that?
My glasses.
Oh, this guy. Okay, you're going to share your Bible?
I'll just use my ears.
Fortunately, I talk a lot. What do you think I mean when I talk about Genesis as being the foundation? Because we're all sitting on a foundation right now. This concrete slab this entire building sits on, is a foundation. Obviously, it's essential. But Genesis is essential as a foundation to the rest of the Bible. Why do you think I say that? Or what is your opinion?
I think it's kind of like a lead up of how in the future we should live.
Yeah, there's a lot of things here that sets the
Something like
standard
that.
for us. Marriage is in here, right?
Yeah.
And here we are today in the heat of a battle over how to define marriage.
Yeah.
God's definition of marriage is found right there in Genesis.
That's one.
And then he gathers all his sons because he wants to bless him.
Yeah, which is we've been talking about how that's common in our society even today.
Yeah. So when he put his hand out, then he put the wrong hand out.
Yeah, that's when he was talking about his grandsons, right? He reverses that and blesses the younger over the older.
Yeah.
All right, and there's more prophecy there. So yeah, Genesis discusses a lot of prophecies and things like that.
Future stuff.
Why did Jesus die?
Us. Our sins.
There's the word. Where do we first hear about the word sin, or at least the concept of sin?
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve, exactly right. That's right. The fall of man. The fall of man is found in Genesis, and then that's it from now on. There's this constant struggle between God and man as it relates to sin. That's actually personified when Jacob wrestles with that celestial being, whoever it was, an angel or God himself, and winds up breaking his hip. And then Jacob's name is changed to Israel as a result of that. Wrestles with God, Israel. there's this whole idea, all these different sins and things like that happen in Genesis, that the Torah, remember Genesis is the first book of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. So there's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and this makes up the Torah. This is the big part of the Jewish Bible. And so then all these things that were going wrong in Genesis, Moses, God through Moses, codifies into law to protect the children of Israel so that they do not offend God. That's in Genesis. How about the destruction of the world? I mean, was that a big deal? That happens in Genesis, right?
Yeah, started a couple of times. Yeah.
I was even joking about it the other day when that big rain came through. My kids were asking me about that. And I said, no, nothing to worry about, although there is a guy down the street building an ark. The other joke is that the lumber yard's all out of gopher wood and that kind of stuff like that. So that's in Genesis. The creation of man is in Genesis. Are we still arguing about that today? Is it evolution or is it creation? How does this all come about? This is Genesis. Boy, this is a big book. Of course, the patriarchs are here, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The women there are amazing, what they go through and how things transpire. And so Genesis is a big deal. Lord willing, in a couple of weeks, we'll start the book of John. And we're going to be talking a lot about Genesis. Jesus did. All right. And so did Paul. So there's going to be a lot there. All right. Any other comments? Questions, concerns? Yeah, I know. It's it's nice just to go along for the ride and listen and hear about this. And that's great. I want to warn you, things are very different in the book of John. Whereas Genesis is a lot of history and a lot of storytelling, not the case in the New Testament. It's much more personal. Because you get to know Jesus personally. And then there's a lot of things that we'll add into our study of John as we go through it. So it's just going to be very different. All right, last thing before we get started. Last week, we buried Jacob. Joe, this week, we buried Joseph. Okay? Don't take it personally. All right. And my middle name.
Was his brothers around him when he died?
Isn't that going to be funny? It's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. When we get there, right, you'll see that he tells his brothers. Now, we don't know how many brothers were still alive. Remember, Joseph's the second youngest.
Yeah.
Okay? Who's younger than Joseph? Benjamin. Right? So maybe just eating all that Egyptian food all those years. Finally caught up with him or something. But yeah, we'll see that. That's a great question to ask. And really, Genesis chapter 50, we still see the fear amongst his brothers for him. Remember, Joseph is just no. Let's try to give it something that we can understand. Possibly in today's understanding, like the United States, Joseph's vice president, which is ironic. Our vice president is also named Joseph. Or funny, not ironic. So that's how powerful of a man Joseph is. After Pharaoh, he's number 1 in all of Egypt. So there's reason. Remember, just with a wave of his hand, he could have his brothers killed. That's how things are. It's not like today where we have to a certain extent much more respect for human life. I'm saying that with a bit of a nausea in my stomach, considering all these videos that have come out about Planned Parenthood. But I've been in that battle since 2004. I've been fighting against the abortion movement. So, but with the exception of that kind of a thing, we have a greater respect for human life. But that's not the case as it was in Egypt during this time. All right, Genesis chapter 50. Congratulations on making it this far. We're in verse 1. All right, just keep in mind, in verse 33, let me go back to verse 33 because it'll help you in verse 1. In verse 33 of chapter 49, it says this: When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Jacob dies. Joseph then threw himself upon his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians mourned for him for 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, if I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him, my father made me swear an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father, then I will return. Pharaoh said, go up and bury your father, as he has made you swear to do. So Joseph went up to bury his father. All of Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court and all the dignitaries of Egypt, besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers and those belonging to his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company. When they reached the threshing floor at Atad, near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly, and there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, the Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning. That is why the place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim. So Jacob's son did as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre, which Abraham had bought as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite, along with the field. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. Verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? So they sent word to Joseph, saying, your father has left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sons of the servants of the God of your father. When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children, and the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth at Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised, an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt.
That's it.
C'est tout, c'est fini. El fin. It's over.
See, it seemed like a long, long, long time we were in Genesis. Now it feels like we were in it a couple of days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually we've been in it for months.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been in it for months.
A lot of information. It just goes, look at it.
Again, it's a book. It's a book to see movies on and to review and to watch other people teach on it. There's a lot to remember, as Lynn's been pointing out, and there's lots that we haven't talked about. Yes, sir.
The embalming, was it done something like the Egyptians were doing it?
This is the Egyptians doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, and they're the ones that are best known for it.
Embalming.
Yeah, and the reason why we know that as Americans, all right, why is it that we know so much about the Egyptians embalming?
1922.
The movie,
Yeah, the movie.
The Mummy.
Yeah.
Mummy.
The Mummy,
The Mummy.
which has been made over and over again.
Yes.
All right. My favorite one is the Mummy and the Three Stooges. All right. I know it sounds silly. All right. Yeah. So the Mummy is that Egyptian embalming that now we have the opportunity to study so much about Egyptology, King Tut specifically, because of the embalming of these guys. And that's what they did. That's what they did. Now, mind you, this is an Egyptian thing. It's a pagan ritual. It's not something God transcribed. Okay, so that's just something to think about. Because the question is, why didn't the children of Israel embalm? Because it's not a Jewish thing. It's an Egyptian thing. All right, going back to verse 33 of Genesis 49. Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons. And we were talking about this last week. He was probably sitting on the side of his bed. This is really interesting to see how a man dies. He knows he's about to die. He's sitting on the side of his bed. He draws his feet up into the bed. He lays down and then breathes his last. It's really interesting. That's, because people sometimes they do know. They know. One of the stories I know, again, this is obviously not involving an older man, but it's a very common story that we've heard a number of times in Navy medicine. Remember, all these Navy ships are at sea. They don't all have doctors on them. There's just not enough doctors. And the crews are small. The smaller ships have crew maybe, 400 or 500, whereas the aircraft carrier that I was on had over 5,500. We didn't just have a doctor. We had a bunch of doctors. We even had a surgeon and an anesthetist, and everybody would do surgery. And then, because we had another 9 ships in the battle group, some of those had doctors, but most of them didn't.
They would bring him to the carrier.
And we'd bring them to the carrier.
Yeah.
And that was part of my job as a medical regulator. I'd fly sailors. I even can tell you a sea story about sitting in the Indian Ocean. We were on our way into the Persian Gulf. And I'm working. By the way, sailors at sea work all the time. If they're not sleeping, eating, or physical fitness, they're working. There's just nothing else to do. And there's so much work to do. So sailors are always working. And so I'm at my desk, and it's late at night, probably 9, 10 o'clock at night, and I'm working. And my phone rings, and it's the officers are all buddies, and I was one of the officers. And even though I'm not a line guy, I'm a staff officer. I'm not a combat officer. My buddy up in combat, that's the place with all the pretty lights and everything flashing and stuff. He calls. He says, "Mark, you got to come up to combat." I said, "Why?" He said, "We're getting a call in, but you're going to have to come up." I said, "What's it about?" He said, "I can't tell you over this phone." Ooh. All right, so I mean, the only time I ever went up there was to cool off, because they have the best air conditioning where all the computers are, and so I mean, I didn't have any business there. I mean, they're all there doing the spooky thing, and so I go in, and she points me to the combat phone, and I pick it up, and this is U.S. Abraham Lincoln Medical, go, and he said, "This is U.S.S. Bremerton Medical." Okay, so what does that mean? All right, the Bremerton is a boomer. Okay? It's a submarine that shoots nuclear ballistic missiles. There are 2 types of submarines. There are the attack submarines. Those are smaller ones. They're very quick, and they just look for other submarines and surface ships. The boomers are big submarines. They carry missiles. They carry the big missiles. That's the Hunt for Red October stuff. So they could drop a nuclear weapon on a city and destroy that city. That's the reason why the Navy is the most destructive force on the planet. We can just, along with the Air Force, we can just level places.
That can destroy anything.
Yeah.
My husband was a submarine.
Yeah.
He was a good one.
My father was. But he mentioned a lot of missiles.
Yeah.
So he must have been.
He was on a boomer. He was on a boomer. My father-in-law, who I'll go see next week down in Connecticut, not only rode submarines for 20 years, he built them, the Trident-capable submarines, down an electric boat in Connecticut. We have a submarine in our battle group, as a matter of fact, but it's just a fast attack. It's not one of the boomers. So here we are. We're about 100 some odd miles off the coast of India. And there's a nuclear ballistic submarine from the United States sitting off the coast of India. Now, wait a minute. What's the big deal? Well, how would you feel if there's a Russian ballistic submarine sitting off the coast of New England? All right, not very happy about that at all. This is why it was a secret. And why I couldn't talk about it over the general phone. I had to come up there, and I had to talk to the corpsman, which what I used to be, who was on board this bubblehead on this submarine. He's an advanced trained corpsman called an independent duty corpsman, like a physician's assistant, very, very good. And they had somebody with appendicitis. And so the corpsman was trying to see if we could possibly take this guy, just in case he needed surgery. And so I had to go up there and talk about this, but it was a secret, and I couldn't tell anybody until long after I was gone and stuff. And so that's the thing about it. But anyway, I tell that story to tell this, as an independent duty corpsman, these young men who are all this advanced training in medicine on a Navy ship way at sea where they can't get any help from a doctor, have to be the doctors. A sailor fell down their ladders and hit himself right here, right? They call it the xiphoid process, the little knife thing at the bottom of your breastplate, okay? And he had a nice bruise there, and he'd lost his breath and stuff like that. And they brought him to sick bay to see the corpsman, the doc. And he was sitting up, and this is, like I said, I've heard the story a number of different times to believe that it's true. And the guy was laying on the bed in the medical department, and the corpsman was going through all the paperwork, and was already taking his vital signs. And his vital signs were a little weird. They were the systolic was heading one way, the diastolic was heading another. But other than that, he was fine. And then the guy just sat up, looked at the corpsman, and said, "Tell my wife I love her," and then died.
You've got mail.
Wow, that was perfect timing.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. That's not the message they sent to his wife, though. But he just knew. He just knew his life was over, and just sat up and said, the xiphoid had severed his aorta. He was bleeding rapidly inside his body. The systolic and diastolic were separating, which is an indicator of blood loss, and because his heart was pumping like crazy to try to keep what little blood was left in the body pumping through. And so he had died. So when I look at this, I'm reminded of that story about sometimes people just know. They just know. And so then the other thing I like about this is a promise to all of us. That last part. Jacob breathed his last and was gathered to his people. What does that mean to you?
He went to the people that we'd left already.
Specifically who?
His family.
His family.
wife,
His family.
kids.
All the members of his group. He went and saw his grandfather Abraham, all right, his father Isaac, and he went and saw his wives, all right. All of that. He was gathered to them. It's a beautiful image, isn't it? Because we talk about what's heaven going to be like. Who are you going to see there? Right? Yeah, well, if people have have trusted God for their salvation, they're going to be in heaven. As are these people right here. They've trusted God, and they're in heaven. So that's what you'll see. So I think that's very beautiful. All right. With Jacob's death, what happens? What does Joseph do?
So,
On his father.
wept.
Wept, not just cried, right?
Wept.
Because when I hear somebody weeping,
Yes.
weeping is different than crying. Crying is like, I'm hurt, somebody help me, things like that. Weeping is absolute sorrow.
Very deep.
Deep sorrow. Has he done this before?
Yes.
Over his brothers, when he first decided it was time for him to tell them who he was.
Yeah.
When he first saw his father.
Yeah.
His father was brought down to Egypt. He wept. They both wept.
Well,
All right.
we saw Benjamin.
Yeah. All right. Do real men cry?
Yes, of course.
Of course they do.
The ladies are all saying that. You're saying that. Okay, you're saying yes, of course it is.
Yeah.
You okay with that, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay, good, yeah. I don't cry. All right, that's it.
Talk
I don't
about
cry.
you gotta be a man to cry.
I just, it's just not that big of a deal.
Tears
For some
don't
reason,
come to your eyes?
they just don't come to my eyes.
You've never cried by yourself?
I have cried by myself, all
Then
right?
you've cried.
Yeah, I know, but it's like
You don't cry outwardly.
I just don't weep.
You don't
I
let
wish I
people see
did.
it.
I wish I did. Because I can still sense it.
But
You
a lot
know?
of people like that can't
Yep.
cry.
Yeah, this kind of crying, this kind of weeping.
Yeah.
It's just really not a part of who I am. And I've always wondered about that,
The other, you have the weeping of the loss, but then you also have the weeping of the finding. When you find the Lord,
Right,
or He actually lets you find Him
right.
and comes to you,
Yeah.
you will weep.
Well,
With
you do know Jesus.
joy.
You know that Jesus. Okay, you're saying different than
Total, yeah.
your experience with Jesus.
Total
Right,
joy.
right. Oh,
Total joy.
weeping with
It's when your soul finds Jesus.
right, weeping with joy, weeping of joy. I don't know if does that work?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh my God.
I can see tears of joy.
It's totally total uncontrolled.
Joyous.
Was that?
So
People
happy
do
to
weep
cry.
and cry when something joyous.
Yeah. Well, see, the word weep, I leave in the camp of sorrow.
Yeah.
Tears of joy, I absolutely I experienced.
Yeah.
All right, and stuff like that too. There are times when I think about like my children, and then I'll tear up. But
Cry for my husband.
I mean,
I
do
cried for my
you
father
weep
'cause I didn't know him.
at all, Sharon?
Do I weep?
Weep.
I cried.
All right, see, yeah, we're similar in that way. All right. Which for me, sometimes I wonder if there's something wrong with me.
But the doctor said, God bless the person.
That like maybe I'm missing a certain part of my humanity.
Is weeping the same as crying?
Well, crying, yeah, what we're saying, weeping is like this weeping here is sorrow, absolute sorrow.
Yeah.
Although, again, when they were being united, well, see, even when they were being united, you think that's cry, tears of joy. It's also weeping over the separation, the loss that they had amongst them. When my mother died, I didn't cry. All right? But part of the reason was because I was kind of praying for her. My mom had fallen. She'd already had a series of minor strokes, which really impaired her. And I mean, I'm very blessed. Yeah, okay, I know, it's okay. There's a. I was noticing again. I was happy that she still remembered me when I go to visit her, but we had to take her out of her home. We had to put her into the Guardian in Brockton and stuff like that. And every month, every week I'd go back and see her and stuff. She still remembered me and stuff like that too. But you could see that it wasn't my mother any longer. And then she had her fall. And I even told my siblings, I said, who weren't medical, I said, start preparing. Mom's not going to be with us much longer. Sure enough, she went to Brockton Hospital, had her surgery, but came down with a pneumonia that killed her. And I'm very blessed that both my parents, I'm the last sibling to see them alive. So part of the reason for that, I think, is because I was prepared. When my dad passed, that was like this. He was in his own apartment. He was on hospice, but I had just seen him. He was still doing very, very well. I'm driving to work. I still remember it because every time now I drive down that portion of the Southeast Expressway going into Boston, my phone rang and my brother called me and said, Dad's dead. And I remember calling him to work saying, I won't be in, turning around, heading back in. I think Gail, because Gail and I pray that when we go, it's together. When we're really, really ancient, I mean, we can't get out of bed in the morning and do anything anymore. That we go to bed one night holding each other and then we wake up in heaven. That's our prayer. But the second prayer is that Gail goes before I do. Doesn't that sound strange?
Yeah.
Why does it sound strange? Because it does. A lot of people do think it's strange.
Well, the reasons for it probably that you say that.
Yeah. Do you know why? Well, why do you think?
Because you're the man of the family and
No.
you protect them all.
But that's on the right track. Gail's more dependent upon me than I am upon her. Well, that's changing every day. I tell her all the time. I get more and more emotionally dependent upon my wife nowadays. All right. But the fact is, if somebody's going to be here alone, it'd be easier on me. It'd be like I said, I don't even weep. It'd be easier on me. She would be
Whoever's
devastated.
strongest,
In this case, emotionally, I am. So
See, I was emotionally stronger than my husband. He
I-
went before me.
that doesn't surprise me at
That's
all.
like my daughter when she wants to go before her husband.
Yep. And the other thing is that we really think heaven's going to be really awesome. And I'd rather see Gail in heaven, all right, and even if I'm not there yet, which, by the way, I think heaven's like this. It's all, everybody just, boom.
There.
You're not waiting for anybody,
Right.
all right? And so that way, Gail's in heaven, it'd be better for me to be here alone versus the other way around. So, but again, I know these are strange things to talk about, but I just really admire Joseph and his great passionate
He's a
love,
strong man.
but great passion.
Yeah.
I mean, he was not an average guy by any means. He's not somebody that you just think you walk by on the street and say, hey, that's just an average guy. He had a great passion and love, and because remember when we were first reading about him, he was a bit of a spoiled brat, right? I mean, isn't he telling everybody about his dreams? Right? Yeah.
But he was just telling dreams, but nobody knew they were going to come true.
Yeah, but that's one of those things about, there's certain things you should keep to yourself.
Yeah.
Especially when you tell all your older brothers and your parents, you're going to be bowing down to me. By the way, keep that in mind when we finish 50. All right, keep that in mind when we finish 50 here in a moment. Because we already know they bowed down to him already. Because they found when he was number 2 in Egypt, they had already bowed down to him. Well, it's going to end that way too. But he's really become such a special, special person, and a precursor of Christ in so many ways. So in verse 2, then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So that comes from Joseph, not from Pharaoh. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. 40 days.
That's a long time.
Yeah, but I've heard that number before.
Rained for 40 days.
Rained for 40 days and 40 nights, didn't it? Yeah. How many days was Jesus in the desert?
40 days.
40 days. All right. Those are just coincidences, folks, here again. But, a lot of fun. All right, because the number 7 is going to come up a lot, too.
Yeah.
All right. So for full 40 days, so there was their time requiring for the embalming, and the Egyptians mourned for him for 70 days. That's not for Joseph. That's for Israel. Yeah, but, all right, we're all of the age where we remember the 6-day war in Israel, in Egypt. We remember the Yom Kippur wars back in the 60s and 70s. We know those. If you think about it for a second, we were all alive.
Yeah.
We were reading about it, watching it on the news. That was the Egyptians attacking Israel. The same, I read that right? The Egyptians mourned for Israel for 70 days. Where did they forget? They obviously forgot.
Yeah, they did.
They have forgot. They have big time. We know that because it's the beginning of Exodus, which we'll
Right.
actually turn into Exodus tonight, because that's how when we studied Exodus. All right, verse 4.
But they had to forget.
Say again?
They had to forget.
Oh, they have. Well, we read about it.
Guys couldn't.
Yeah, we just turned a couple pages to Exodus, and it practically starts right out. We'll finish with that tonight, because when they start, because it flows over. Verse 4. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court. So it's not only Pharaoh himself, but that's all the other guys all around him and stuff. If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him, my father made me swear an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father, then I will return. Okay. So, hey, the idea of burial plots all the way back in Genesis. Verse 6, Pharaoh said, go up and bury your father as he has made you swear to do. Again, Joseph's Pharaoh's number one guy. So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court, and all the dignitaries of Egypt. This is not us going to bury people over in Oak. What was it? Oaks? Oak Lawn, right? Oak Grove. Thank you. That's right. Oak Grove. All right. They're going from Egypt to Canaan, to Israel. That's the whole Sinai Desert. All right. That's crossing the Red Sea. All right. Going all the way across the Sinai Desert, all the way to Canaan. This is everybody and his brother. All right. All the big shots in Egypt. That's amazing. Again, it keeps wondering, how did I forget this guy? All right.
True.
All right, so now, and then there's all of Joseph's, the members of Joseph's household and his brothers, and those belonging to his father's household. So if anybody was related to Israel, or to Jacob, they're all going. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. So the babies got left behind, and there were probably caretakers to stay there with them. Verse 9, it's a military procession. These are military honors. Chariots and horsemen also went up with them. It was a very large company.
Very large.
Very large. Okay, so here you are. You're a goat herder in Canaan. Okay? You're out there in the field, right? And you're taking care of your goats, and then you see this group coming. What do you think that's going to be?
Invasion.
Okay? So there you are. You're just sitting out there, taking care of your goats, and you look out over the hills, and oh my goodness. All right. Verse 10. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly. And there Joseph observed how many days? 7-day period of mourning for his father. All right, a threshing floor. So in the days of when they were growing wheat, you had to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? So I don't know how much you guys know about wheat. So there's the little wheat parts, right? So they got banging on this humongous stone floor, and then the wind hopefully blows off the chaff. And then you're able to keep all of the wheat. And so this thing's a big, humongous stone, which also could be used as a stage. So 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites, so these are the goat herders hanging around, who lived there, saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, the Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning. And then they named it for that ceremony, Abel Mizraim. Verse 12. So Jacob's sons did as he commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which Abraham had bought as a burial place for Ephron the Hittite, along with the field. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. Verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? So they sent word to Joseph, saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of God of your father.
I still don't trust him.
Yeah, they don't trust him. That's the first thing. Anybody buying this?
It's guilt. They're just guilty.
Do you think Jacob really told the brothers this?
No. They're lying again.
Don't you think he would have told Joseph?
Of course.
That would be part of his commands to his son. Joseph's already told him he's not going to hurt him. Already said this. But now that the father is dead, all right, that's the concern.
And they said, let's tell them that our father said this.
Yeah, they give you every
They're
indication.
guilty.
They're making every indication that they're making this story up. That's exactly right. They're lying, and they've got a long history of it. Yep, they lied about Joseph to Jacob, and so now they're going to lie about Jacob to Joseph. What's this? That there's nothing new under the sun. These things continue to happen. So I stopped, though. I noticed I stopped before I got into verse 18. I didn't finish all of verse 17. What's the end of verse 17?
Joseph wept.
Yes, very good. When the message came to him, Joseph wept. There's the sorrow again. Why can't we just be a loving family? Sound familiar, Lynn? Yeah, all right. That's what Lynn's going through right now. Why can't we just be a loving family? My brothers, I got two brothers. I got two brothers and a sister. We have nothing to do with each other. Nothing.
I think that's terrible.
It's horrible.
That families cannot get, that's today, families cannot get along.
Nope.
They're hurting the others more than they're hurting each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
And now that I
going crazy over my daughter and his daughter.
yeah.
Not
It's
getting
like
along.
daughters staying mad with their mothers. I could never stay mad at my mother and father. Ever.
no,
Or my brother, it's only him and I.
yeah.
But it's just something I can't understand.
There's this element in our hearts of not wanting to admit wrong, and because of that, we just can't seem to move past that. And it's so funny because you talk about cultures. A lot of cultures, they're all in favor of just ripping into each other, tearing each other apart. But once you're done, back to normal. All right, back to love, back to or else you're going to be ostracized. My mother and I didn't have the best of a relation. All right, but I'll tell you, I think I've shared with you before.
You've got mail.
Okay,
And the mail for you.
And
Every time you talk about death, that thing comes up.
or should I be talking to my mother? But especially after I went in the Navy, my attitude towards her changed dramatically. But I think I told you before that my brother Matthew and I are both military retirees. And so we spent a lot of time after we became adults away from my mother. And so the joke between the two of us was, we know who my mother's favorite child is by whoever's the furthest away. Matthew Air Force, his overseas tours were in England and Germany. Mine were in Japan. And so whenever one of us got sent overseas, we would tell the other one, well, I'm now the favorite one. And because we couldn't irritate my mother. But I bought my mother a house. That's how, to me, how much I thought of my mother and how important she was to me. And then bought the house overwhelmingly just for one reason. So she can plant her own flowers. When she had an apartment, she couldn't. She always had them. And those crocuses still come up every spring. So here's the situation where I think just Joseph, again, this applies so much to what's going on with us today. Guys, can't you just get over this? Can't we just Just can we just love each other?
Some don't even want to try.
Again, it goes back to this idea they don't want to get killed. I think that's what's the same with my brothers and my sister. Definitely with my sister. She really screwed this up. My brother Fred definitely, screwed it up, and then he affected my brother Brian so much that my brother Brian has kept distance. The irony is my brother Freddie now is divorced. I think for cheating on his wife. She's re-engaged with me on Facebook. I can't comment to her because I still want to leave room to reconcile with my brother Freddie. But this is going to be tearing my brother Brian apart because he loves his sister-in-law. Loved her deeply. And they have 2 beautiful sons. One of the sons doesn't have anything to do with my brother now. See what I mean? It becomes generational. And it's horribly sad. But this is, again, we go back to Genesis. It's right there in Genesis.
This whole little section just in here is so filled with Jesus so much.
Yep.
Because that's the whole world today. They can't trust Jesus. These people, you have to trust him 100%, and the world can't do it. It's the whole exact same. And he is a precursor to Jesus. He reassured them and spoke kindly to them. That's exactly what Jesus wants all of us to do.
And he actually says something that's kind of neat. Just to make it clear. Let's read about that. So we're in verse 18. Now, so we just finished with what, Janice said, Joseph wept. Verse 18. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. So there it is again, right? The stars will bow, and then the sheaves, verse 19. Now check this out.
Yes.
But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? The answer is, yeah, you are. You can take our lives now. Okay? You have every right to, as Jesus did, even hanging on the cross. Had every right to call down a legion of angels and wipe us all out. Chose not to. Isn't that amazing?
Thank God.
You intended to harm me, which they did. They didn't intend, they did. We didn't intend to harm Jesus, we did harm him. But God intended it for good. Amen to that. And this is the one thing I want to encourage everybody to be thinking about. When harm comes to you, don't forget, God knows about it. He knew it was going to happen. So he's just looking to see, sometimes it's just see, will we respond as Jesus did? Will we respond as Joseph did? Okay, that's the key. It's not easy. Please, God doesn't think it's easy either. He knows this is very hard. To accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. That's Jesus. So then, here it is.
Don't be afraid.
The number one admonition from God, fear not, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. It ain't me. At least not in my heart. That's where I need Jesus in my heart. Indwelling life of Christ. Verse 22. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the 3rd generation of Ephraim's children. Also the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. All right? I'm not a grandfather. I know I'm sitting amongst grandparents here. That's a joyous thing. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die. So that goes back to what Joe was asking earlier, right? Yeah. All right. Then Joseph said to his brothers, so I don't know how many brothers. They may have already buried a number of them. Okay, but who knows? I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and you must carry my bones up from this place. That's a prophecy. Wait, let me get this straight. I'm living fat, dumb, and happy down in Goshen, right? The Egyptians love us. They think the world of us. Why would God have to come to our aid? He's prophesying what's going to happen in Exodus. And the only promise he makes them swear by is that when God comes to your aid, take my bones out of here. We're leaving? All right, that's all there. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. All right, those sarcophaguses, those are really neat things. All right, now don't close your Bibles. If you want to turn to Exodus chapter 1. We did this study a long, long time ago. Yep, the next, right after Genesis. Exodus 1. Okay, so we're going to read just a little bit of this. Exodus chapter 1, verse 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt with Jacob, with each of his family. And they're the sons' names again, right? We've heard them a number of times. Down to verse 5. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. Verse 6. Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died, but the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous, so that the land was filled with them. Then a new king, who did not know about Joseph, came to power in Egypt. Verse 9, look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. Verse 11, so they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with the hard labor in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. And all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. And then comes Moses.
Praise God.
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Atah Adonai. Praise God, praise His name. That's it, ladies and gentlemen.
They finally got daughters in here, they start calling the girls.
Yeah.
Oh, you already reading this?
Yeah,
Yep.
she said that's right there.
We're gonna go to John now.
Yeah.
I know, but I'm just saying, that finally the girls come in here and they
Yeah.
calling the girls.
Hey, one of the things you're going to like about the book of John, you find out how quickly Jesus is the first feminist.
So John was the book of the Bible that I refused to read.
Really?
I didn't want to read that book. I'd pass it up. Every time I get to it, I'd say, no, I ain't reading it. No, I ain't reading it.
Hopefully we'll see you guys for the book of John. God bless.